and gentlemen, our podcast is made possible by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and sponsored by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. As you can see, it's episode 100. My man Mark Ostrander is hoping to co-host this one, and I'm joined by my father, the Hall of Famer, Ron Mirikitani. Mark, I'm going to let you start off.
Hi, Ron. Glad to have you. Hi, David. You're right, David. I was going to say hi to your dad first, so you won that one. Ron, kind of, first of all, what I'd like to know is kind of back in World War II, and I think that's kind of when everything started. And you were here. Obviously, you were born here, as far as I know. And kind of tell us what it was like to be at that time in the United States, would you please?
Sure. I am third generation Sansei. My grandparents were the first ones here, the Issei, and my parents were second generation Nisei. When the war broke out, they had a proclamation out that all Japanese Americans were going to be placed in relocation camps. They had 1 to 3 weeks to get all their possessions together, and they were only allowed with probably just a large trunk. My mother lived on a farm. She had all the land and all the equipment. My father's parents were barbers. They were from Stockton, California. So when this came out, they knew they had to be shipped out to these camps, and they either had to try to sell it or get rid of it. Which is very difficult because people knew they were going to leave, so they didn't have to buy anything. They just more or less stole stuff. I remember my dad told me that when he heard what was going to happen, his father told him to take the swords that we had in our family, samurai swords, and take them to the river and just throw them in the river. Didn't want anyone to have them. It was, I didn't really think about that a whole lot until I got a little older, and I was thinking that how horrible it would be just for me if I had to pack everything I wanted in a small trunk and they took everything else away from me. My parents never say anything that was harsh, never say anything about the government. In the United States, they were loyal Americans, and they did that because they felt that that was a thing that Americans did at that time, Japanese Americans.
Okay. It just seems like, were you born in that camp then, Ron?
Yes, I was born.
Or how old were you when you were there?
I was born in camps.
You were born in the camp?
Yes, I was born in Arkansas. Arkansas was the furthest east that the camps went. Most of the Japanese lived on the West Coast in California. And there were 2 camps in California, 2 camps in Arizona, and 2 camps in Arkansas, which is the furthest east. And I was born in Aurora, Arkansas in 1941.
Okay. And so, Ron, can you kind of tell us how you got involved into wrestling? There's so many facets to this that I'm just amazed by what you've done with your life, all the things you've accomplished. How did you get started into wrestling?
Well, I never wrestled in high school. My high school never had wrestling. I probably need to go back. I was always really pretty competitive. My grandparents lived with my parents because the culture was that the oldest son take in the parents. My parents were from arranged marriage, and so we first moved. We moved out of the camps in Arkansas. They gave us $50 and said, you can leave. So we stopped in Kansas City. My uncle served in the 442nd Battalion, which is the most decorated unit in World War II. They fought in France and Italy. But he said when they came through Kansas City, they were the only people that really were kind of nice to the Japanese. They fed them, and there was not a whole lot of prejudice. So when we got out, we took a bus. My family took a bus, and we ended up in Kansas City. We lived on top of a garage, 4 families in there, until parents could earn some money. I knew my dad had a couple of jobs and so forth, and so we were in that situation. I remember when I was real young that my grandmother especially always stressed how important it was for me to be good, do my best. You said you represent the Mirikitani family, but you also represent the Japanese nation, which, I think about now, that's a lot of responsibility on a kid. But, I think that's probably one of the things that drove me. And you said, how did I get started in wrestling? I never wrestled in high school. I played football. I was pretty good in football. I was first team all city, all district. I was honorable mention all city in basketball, and I ran track. So I was a three-letter athlete in high school. And I was voted outstanding athlete my senior year. I went on a football scholarship to Central Missouri State University, which is now University of Central Missouri. And after football, I was going to go out for basketball, and the backfield coach was the wrestling coach. And he went and talked to the basketball coach and said, "You got to cut that guy because he's never going to be big enough to play basketball, but he could probably wrestle real well." So, they cut me after the first day, and I was really broken. I knew I was better than all the guys that were out there. I said, "How in the heck can I get cut?" Because I was in high school, I was pretty good in everything I tried. Yeah. But then the coach came and said, "You ought to come off for wrestling. You could probably be a conference champion for this year or something." I said, "Oh, okay." Didn't have anything else to do, so I went out for wrestling. And I really, really enjoyed it. I played football around 158. My weight probably should have been probably 147 at that time. There was a state champion there. I couldn't beat him. At 137, there was a regional champion from New York there who I couldn't beat. 130 was another guy that was really good. He's a district champ or something. I couldn't beat him. So 123 was my weight. I could probably go where I could make the weight. So I had to lose over 30 pounds to make that weight. But I was, like I said, I was pretty competitive, and I wanted to wrestle, and I'm not used to sitting down, so I made the cut. And I lost my first wrestle off the kid. His name was Larry Norcross. I lost, and it was best 2 out of 3. And I went back to the dorm. I cried. I was really upset. I'd never been second. I came back the next day and beat him. The next day, so I started ever since. But that's how I started. I was pretty competitive. I was pretty athletic. I cut a lot of weight, and I just felt like making those kind of sacrifices I shouldn't lose. So I just, I just competed.
I guess, one thing I get out of that, Ron, is because I've been a head coach and coached at a program that, with you and against you, basically. I never had a kid come out for wrestling his freshman year in college and has never competed in wrestling. And to then be upset if they didn't make the team, that's unheard of. And for you to lose your first wrestling match in a wrestle off, and then to be that upset when you've never done the sport before, shows what kind of character that you have and how much you're willing to work to get what you want. So that's pretty impressive. So, David, would you like to ask your dad a question?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that's interesting is, so you wrestled 4 years, but I think from what I understand, you really fell in love with the sport as a postgraduate, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And so tell people about that, like where you went after Central Missouri.
Well, I only wrestled first 3 years. My senior year, we were on a quarter system, so I did my student teaching, and I went back to my high school, and I was really well known there, and they made me the coach of the junior varsity, and we went 12-0, and I just thought that was great, and they offered me the head job the next year at my high school, and that was a dream job for me because I'm going back to my high school. Everyone knows me there. I have a good reputation. I met Jan at that time. We were going to get married. And so I thought my life was set. And the assistant track coach at Central Missouri said, "Hey, Mark," he says, "how'd you like to go work for the defending national champions?" I said, "What?" He says, "I can get you a graduate assistantship at Iowa State." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, why don't you think about it?" So, I I went home and I talked to Jan, and we were engaged, and she said, you want to go, don't you? I said, yeah, I don't know enough wrestling to really be a good coach. I said, I don't want to be second class. I said, I want to know what these guys are doing. But although I was pretty successful, I knew I didn't know what I needed to know to be a good coach. And so I took him up on, and then next year, Jan said, we can get married after a year or two if you want. And I said, that's fine. And so I went up there, and Coach Nichols was just like a dad to me, and Les Anderson was just like a brother. I don't know why they were so nice to me. They took me in, they were just great. And I probably just bored the hell out of them, asking questions all the time in the room, just unbelievable. But I loved it. It was just like I came out of a long tunnel into sunlight. I thought, oh my gosh. And I think people think that, that's old stuff back then, but, it's the way you think. That was the main thing I think that happens when you get with some people who are genius in some different areas. I remember Les Anderson asked me one time, he said, you right hand or left hand, Ron? I said, I'm right handed. He says, so your left arm is the strongest arm. I said, no, I'm right handed. He goes, no, I said, if I give you a bucket of nails here, what would you put in? He says, I put my right hand. You had to open the door. What'd you do? I put my left hand, open the door with my right hand. See, your left hand's your strongest arm. I said, I never thought of it like that before. But it was just their way of thinking on technique. They were so scientific, even on takedowns, how you place the position of your toes, how your back leg should be, the position your foot is flat, inside, outside. I mean, it was so technical. I couldn't believe it. I thought this is just awesome.
So when you were a grad assistant, Ron, were you able to did you work out with the team quite a bit?
Oh yeah, every night.
Were you on the mat with them?
Oh yeah, every night.
So you probably kept learning kind of like a sponge. Even the guys that were in that program, obviously they won the national tournament that year before you came in. So they had quality kids in that room every day for you to train with.
Well, that first year I was there, that's when Gable came in. Gable, you know what that team was like, Gable and Smith and Marcusi, and I mean, Gordon Hassman, all those guys, Smokey Wallman, Ernie Gillum, they're all just nails in there, and you don't only have national champions, you got Olympic champions walking around that place, so
yep.
it was mind blowing to me. And they were nice to me. That was great. And they helped me if I asked questions, they would answer questions, it was great.
Okay, so I guess what I'd like to know is you made that transition then from there. Did you go back to the high school or did you go straight to Merrimack College?
I spent 1 year at a high school, Webster Groves. And then after that, I was offered a job in Merrimack, and I wasn't going to take it. I really liked the job at Webster. I mean, I had some studs come back, and I really liked the kids, and they liked me. And my wife said, you probably want to go back to college. And so I interviewed, and they wanted me, and they were so good to me. And the raise I got was substantial what I got in high school. In high school, I coached football. I was a head wrestling, head tennis coach, and I taught swimming all summer and just hardly had enough money to make ends meet. I went to Merrimack. They bumped it up, a couple thousand, so it was livable. So I had to do that. Dave was born that same year, so it was important that I had some finances coming in.
One of the things I want to ask my dad is, so we talk all the time about how wrestling is a martial art, and most of the guys that I know that are really good coaches don't have a martial arts background; they have a wrestling background. So, and you always taught us that if the move doesn't work, it's not always just do it harder; it's doing more correct or find a different way to do the move. How much of being around all those guys, what you call them geniuses at Iowa State, how much did that feed into how you view the sport as martial arts?
Well, you try to put yourself in a position where you are the strongest, either angle-wise, physiologically, and each person is built different. That's what's I think, so challenging about wrestling. You get people who are taller, shorter, stronger, more flexible. There's so many variables involved. So you can't just say you do a move this way, it's going to work for you. And I think that once you understand that and you try to adapt your coaching to the individual wrestlers you have, I think you just get better. And I think one of the things that I have been able to do is I've been able to pick out a person I'm trying to coach and figure out what he does right and what he does wrong and how to fix that position. Like when I was coaching Dave, I just tried to find ways that he was weak in different positions. And I just say, hey, you need to improve on this right here. Do this and do this and whatever else. And he was coachable and smart enough to figure things out. And he was successful. But a lot of guys don't have the ability to make adjustments. I remember Les Anderson when he was recruiting Dave. He came after and he says, "You've done a good job with Dave." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "He can adapt almost every position he's in." I said, Les, I said, I try to coach all my kids, whether they're my sons or on a team. I said, some guys can pick up, some guys can't. He had big grand faces. You're right. So some guys can't adapt like that. And I said, it all depends a lot on who you're coaching, how motivated they are, how intelligent they are, and then the physiological tools they have to work with. There's so many variables that are involved to be a good wrestler.
Yeah. I remember, Ron, first time I met you, that was back in 1980. You probably don't remember this, but we wrestled at the regional tournament, and I think it was at Merrimack. It was in St. Louis. That's all I remember because I didn't know St. Louis at the time, and I had wrestled for Iowa Central, and we had our regional tournament, and I had won the regional tournament against a kid from Ellsworth in the finals, and he was like a two-time state champ in Iowa. I never won state in Iowa, placed third once. So, I really wasn't expecting to do, great things. But I remember after that match, walking off the mat, and Denny Fredericks was my head coach. And I know he went to Iowa State. He may have been there while you were there. I don't know. But I remember you coming up to me, congratulating me, and said I did a really good job. And I didn't know who you were at the time. And then I went over to the scorer table to give my ankle bracelets back, and your wife was sitting there, and I didn't know that at the time, and it was Jan Mirikitani, and she congratulated me on the match and said I did a really good job. It's the first time in my whole career of wrestling that I had another coach and somebody at the scorers table ever congratulate me on what I did out there. And I fell in love with you guys from that time on. And I know I've coached against you. I was assistant coach at Iowa Central for 6 years, and I was head coach for 7 years. So, and we became really good friends.
Sure.
And I became really good friends with your wife also. She's a big part of your life. Can you kind of explain how because she's like no other woman I've ever met. She is at every event. She's at every meet you had. She was at the scorers table. And I got out of line one time. The officiating wasn't very good there, Ron, and I kind of let you know about it. And she pulled me off to a side and said, "Mark, you will never do that." And I said I was sorry, and I would never do it again. And then we were good again. So kind of explain to the viewers what it means to have a wife that's really involved in the sport that you love.
I don't think any wrestling coach can be successful if he's married that didn't have a wife that's supportive. I've really been blessed to have a godly woman who really loves wrestling. She never knew anything about wrestling until she went to Central Missouri, and she started the Graph Let's there, which was a women's group that kept score. When teams came in, they film around. They just helped with the mechanics, helped the coaches out. My first year coaching at Webster, it was a big team sport there, and wrestling was very popular there. And she said, "What are you going to try to do to get people to matches?" And I said, "I guess we're going to maybe put out some posters. If you said, I'll make posters for you." So she said, "Is there anything else you want to get done?" I said, "No, I guess that's all we're going to do." She says, "Why don't you making some ascots?" I said, "What's an ascot?" It's one of those things you put on your neck and then you pull it out. And she said, "We'll make one side black, we'll make the other side orange, and I will embroider the weight classes of each kid. Orange numbers in black and black on orange. And on meet day, if it's home meet, they'll wear the black with the orange and then reverse on away meets." And kids had to wear a nice shirt and they pull their collars out. And the guys loved it. And they'd walk around. they're wrestling today, and they're part of an organization, and it was visible to all the students. First time we passed it, and our kids, well, and we had a good team. I had a bunch of kids that just wanted to compete, and that was, I mean, she's, like I said, she's always been there when I'm in Merrimack. She kept score from. She taped all Dave and Jason's matches. I mean, she's just always been there, and keeps me straight north. She's been a wonderful partner.
The first year I won state, Mark, my dad was actually a national, so my mom was the one that walked me through the tournament.
Well, no wonder you won, David.
Yeah, it's funny. I beat a kid that year in the quarters that was supposed to win it, and he got on a payphone. And my dad was in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Nationals were, and I was all excited. And he's like, "What are you celebrating about?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Did you go down there and take six?" And I was like, "He's like, all you've done now is take six, and that's only if you make weight tomorrow." And I kind of listened. And then in that semi match, like 6 seconds in the match, the guy headbutted me. Like I thought he broke my nose and took me down out of bounds. And our assistant coach, Matlock, he'd been listening to the call. He walks over, he goes, "You gonna live?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You ready to listen to your dad now?" So there's a lot of wisdom there between both those people for sure.
So, Ron, how many years did you coach at Merrimack?
39.
39 years. And I think you don't you still own the record for most wins of a junior college coach in wrestling?
I think so.
The last time I checked.
Yeah.
So 39 years. How many Hall of Fames have you been inducted into, Ron?
10.
10 Hall of Fames just in wrestling.
No, some of those are martial arts.
Okay. All right. What's it like being, because I mean, I've been inducted into one Hall of Fame, and that was junior college. And I don't even know how I got in there, to be honest with you. But I mean, but it's something I'm proud of. It's something that you'll always have. You can tell your kids about, you can tell your grandkids about. How do you tell your kids about 10? I mean, how do you even get inducted into 10 different Hall of Fames?
I don't know. I guess when you get old, people feel sorry for you and just stick you in stuff. I guess I don't know.
I doubt that's it.
I've been really fortunate to know a lot of important people and made friends with a lot of good people. And it's gratifying to know that made some kind of contribution.
But you have done that. So there's another thing I wanted to ask you, Ron, while I got you here. You were the president of the National Coaches Association, am I correct?
Yes.
And that's all coaches, Division I, Division II, Division III, junior college,
Yes.
correct? Has there ever been a junior college coach president of the rest of the Coaches Association besides yourself?
I think there might have been one when it first started early on, I think. Okay. But normally they give it to Division I coach. So it was really an honor. Actually, when they first asked me if I would be interested in doing it, I was in so many organizations, and Dave said, "Dad, you got so many things on your plate. You don't have time to do all this stuff." And so I told him no. And then Wayne Balkman, a good friend of mine, we sit together at these meetings, and the next voting time came up, and he puts me up there. I go, "Wayne," I said, "I don't think I want." He says, "Ron, you gotta be it." I said, "Okay." So I said, "Okay." So I didn't withdraw my name, and they voted, and I got it, which is really, really surprising to me because the other people there were Division I coaches, and I would never expected something like that, and it was really an honor. And they had to help me, I'm sure. With my association with so many different coaches, when we go to different meets and stuff, I see a lot of people, and so does Dave, and Dave's done a lot of recruiting, so he knows a lot in that area. But it was it was really an honor to be selected to coach NWCA.
Yeah, that's impressive.
I don't remember being dumb enough to tell him not to teach.
Oh, I can believe that, David, because you probably had a sheet written out, one of those spreadsheets of all the things that he did and that he wasn't going to have time.
I probably wanted to make more recruiting calls.
There you go. So, Ron, what was the hardest thing for you coaching? I know I have a lot of stories, but what is the hardest thing for you when you were coaching in junior college? Because I don't think people understand the turnover that junior college has every 2 years. Every year you basically got a group of 20 kids coming in that are new, and you lose about half your team. And if you do it right, you want to have at least half your team sophomores, half your team freshmen. So you kind of know where you're at. You don't want all sophomores on your team and then have to start all over the next year. How hard was it for you to do that in junior college? And what did you like and dislike about the 2 years, only having kids 2 years?
Well, when I first started coaching, I didn't have an assistant coach. So I had to do everything. I had to do my own scheduling. I had to get my own buses, get my own referees, order my own uniforms, practice gear. I had a budget, schedule everything, call the motels, wash uniforms. It was a big job. But if you get in college, this is what you do. I didn't realize that a lot of big programs have assistant coaches that do all this stuff. I just thought that's what you're supposed to do. So I did all that stuff. And recruiting wise, I was so busy. In the summertime, I taught all classes I could get because we needed the finances. So I didn't really get a chance to go out and recruit. I did have open gyms on Tuesday and Thursday nights. I had a lot of kids come in and work out there, and I had a lot of tournaments. And so kids would come and see our campus. But to go out every state meet or every Fargo meet, those type of things, I didn't have to do that. That didn't come about until Dave started doing that, and then that's when our recruiting really picked up. But I think what happened was in the early years, I was really blessed. I just had some good kids, just rough, tough kids that wanted to compete and would listen to you. And I really enjoyed those years. Even though we didn't have the national champs and all those type of things, I had hardworking kids, and I always had at least 1 or 2 kids every year that were willing to really bust themselves and go all out. And that to me was really gratifying. Once they started recruiting, we started getting a bunch of them. I didn't have to do too much. You just kind of close the door and say, "See you guys in a couple hours," But it was a lot easier because that took away the responsibility of just getting really top-notch guys. That he went and got them, and so I could do other things, and we could concentrate on tapes, and we're there a week and try to figure those guys out, and we got better. But even though we had some really, really good teams near the end, I really enjoyed a lot of the kids that we had in the beginning and in the middle. They're fun guys just to be with. Because right now, when I'm out coaching, I see guys all the time who were not the national champs, and they may not even start with us, but they're great kids, and they're contributing, and I can tell the kids they're coaching love them, and they're really making a big impact on a lot of the young people.
Yeah, I think it's hard for people to understand. As a head coach, a lot of my favorite kids I had on the team may have been starters, but they may not even been All-Americans.
That's right.
But they just work so hard, and it's contagious in a wrestling room. You have 3 and 4 time state champs coming into your room every once in a while. Iowa Central had maybe a few more for a while than you guys did because David wasn't recruiting them, thank God. But I mean, I remember one year I had like 8 3-time state champs in my room. And,
wow.
They came into the room and I'd say, half of you guys aren't even going to start for me. And they kind of, yeah, right. Okay. Nobody's ever beaten me. I'm 3-time state champ. And they're losing the guys that place 3rd and 4th at the state just because they wanted it more than the guys that were, and they just couldn't understand. Well, you must not be a very good coach. I'm bringing a kid that got 3rd and 4th in states kicking your butt right now. Yeah. He's learning. You're just sitting on what you've done in the past, and the past doesn't do you any good in the future. unless you've learned something and you're building on that. So, yeah, I know what you mean. It's hard for people to understand that some of our favorite kids that we work with are the kids that were not the favorites going in, but worked so hard.
Yeah.
And maybe they just qualified for the national tournament. Maybe that was the best that they were ever going to do, but they were able to do that. And the look on their face and the look on how proud their parents are and
Right.
their friends were, it made everything possible
Yeah.
to do that. So, David, you got any more questions you want to ask?
Well, there's two things that popped up. One is I remember one year we had a kid on the team that was on one of our really good teams. We had a kid at 133 that placed, but he had never placed in Missouri high school in class 2, which is almost mathematically impossible not to do if the rest of our city for 40 years, not to squeeze out a 6th. And then he goes in a weight class that had 8 All-Americans. And, he loses in the quarterfinals. 8 All-Americans were spread out, and then he had to wrestle another one on the back. And he's warming up, and my dad would coach certain guys, and I would coach certain guys, like warm up with them, and I started laughing real loud, and he was like, "What are you laughing about?" I go, "Oh, I was just thinking about the fact that 15 minutes from now, all your buddies that gave you hell about never being high school medalists, you're going to be able to tell them, that you'll buzz off because you're going to be a college All-American for the rest of your life." And he went out there and beat the hell out of it. I think he beat him so bad they took a couple penalty points away from him. He came off. My dad goes, "What'd you say to him?" I told him that. So yeah, those I remember those stories as much as the guys that won nationals. I think the other thing that's interesting to me, Mark, is how many guys are coaching and wrestling now that wrestled for my dad in high school and in college. And I don't think Missouri Border Pro exists without my dad. I don't think the podcast, the ranking stuff that we do would exist without my dad, because I always tell them, the conversations that you and me have are the same ones I had with them when they come over for a barbecue. They're the same ones over break. We used to watch wrestling on the wall, watch the practices, watch the finals of the matches we won in. And, even I think this guy will beat this guy the next time once he makes this adjustment. And it sounds crazy. It's one of the reasons why I think we do so good in those fantasy pools, because we know who can adjust and actually beat people. So, I don't know if you probably don't keep track of this. Do you have any idea how many kids are adults now that are coaching that wrestle for you?
No, I don't know.
It's got to be at least 50, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Well, one year in Missouri, a couple of years ago, the Class 3 and Class 4 state champions, both of those guys wrestled for my dad. And that was a cool picture to take with those guys.
Yeah, and I can honestly tell you, Ron, as much as David and I talk, I bet I could count on 2 hands of all the conversations we've had that you and your wife, one of you always are in the conversation that we have, whether we were doing rankings. But what would Ron think about, putting this guy here, or, something about Jan. And I'm going to correct you, Ron. When you started out coaching and you said you didn't have an assistant.
Yeah, you're right.
I think you had one of the best assistants possible in Jan, because I'm sure she did a lot of that stuff that you were talking about. So, kudos to her. So, but you've been a mentor to me. Growing up, I always tried to pick little things that I learned from people, because I knew when I was early on, I wanted to be a coach. All the way when I was in 8th grade, when I was coaching Little League Baseball, it was my passion. I just wanted to see kids succeed. And it wasn't that I was a great wrestler, because obviously I was not. I worked hard. My dad instilled that in me. My brothers instilled that in me. But I'd always take something from the coaches that I'd been involved with, whether it was high school coaches that I didn't think were very good, but there's always something about them that, I liked, or they did something that I could see me doing. And were you able to do that when you started coaching, take things from the other people that you had worked with and incorporate that into your program, Ron?
Yeah, I think everyone does it. I think you always are trying to imitate or take things from people that you think will work. I've always been fortunate in being able to pick out things like when Dave was wrestling, I could pick out what he did right and wrong, and I could make those adjustments for him. And when I'm listening to a coach, they may teach something just a little differently than me that would work for my heavyweight and not for my 33 pounder, you know. And so I think, and I love going to big meets and going early and watching them warming up and doing their drills and stuff. And I always pick up little things that people do on setups and how they finish and how they penetrate. I mean, there's so many things you can learn if you're into and looking for certain opportunities. And I watch different type builds of people, if you know they're taller or skinnier, or you know, some people don't even look like they're to be out there. And man, they got some slick stuff they do because they take advantage of their physiological strengths. And the first time I saw Mark Frankfeld, he walked on that, and I said, "This is a basketball player." And he stepped over on a weird guy and said, "No, no," and he put the leg in and took the guy down. Holy mackerel! And I thought, you know, hear that.
And now people are doing that all the time.
Yeah. And that was a no-no, you know, my first hour. I said, well, you can do that. You can do that. You can make the adjustment to put the weight on this side. You can get away with that. So, you know, I think you can pick up things from just about anybody. And even you know, the young kids that come in the room, they make some mistakes, but sometimes you can pick up on those mistakes. And if they do something just a little bit different, they can get better in that position. So, yeah, I try to pick up from anybody I can.
You know, last year, Mark, we did 2 clinics or 2 seminars here in St. Louis with my buddy Marcus Payne with Thoroughbred Wrestling. We brought in Zane Rutherford and Alex Dieringer. And, you know, my dad came up and was one of the counselors, you know, for both of those. You know, what's interesting is, you know, we have different high school coaches come in. A lot of times if they brought in kids, we wouldn't charge the high school coaches. And the high school coaches would act, a lot of them would act like they already knew it all, which clearly they don't know how to tell guys like Zane or Neil Arm Farley guys like Alex Dieringer did. And I would always walk over to my dad because I'm like, I wanted to learn the way he was learning. I'm like, well, you know, what do you see that he's doing different? Because everybody's trying to ride legs, and not everybody's better than people on hand. Everybody knows some version of a fireman or a sweep single. I mean, some version of it. But people aren't winning Hodge trophies with that. And especially like with Dieringer. And he has like 7 moves. You know, I mean, he's really, really good at those 7 moves. But he doesn't do 37 things. He does 7 things. And so, you know, being able to pick his brain, and you're right, now that I think about it, because you and I will talk a lot about it. I'm like, well, like, hey man, you know, if this guy can control this guy's lead wrist, you know, that was a lot of the stuff, you know, that we talked about a lot, because when I was first coaching with my dad, we didn't recruit a bunch of studs. And I always joke, when you have the guy that's worst, you want to wrestle the better guys as many times as you can. Because you keep getting film and you break it down and get it closer and closer. Like at the end, when we had like the Aaron Senzi's, Deron Wynn, Jamel Joneses, Bobby Kahns, those guys of the world, Derek Hearns of the world, we were like, we don't care what they see this at districts. Like, you know, we're going to go, those guys are going to win their bracket anyway. So, you know, and the fact that they don't get to see us 6 times probably helps us, you know. So I think one important thing to point out, and we're recording this on June 1, but May was Asian American and Pacific Islander month. And so, Dan, I think, you know, I wanted to have you on. I've been bugging to get you on for a while, I guess. I told Mark a quick story. I called Mom, and Mom put you on speaker, and he said you do it. So I immediately hung up before you change your mind. First rule of sales is once you get the yes, is you get off the phone. But I timed it out so it'd be episode 100, which politically is really important to me, because I can now say this is my favorite person. None of the other coaches will be upset. Everyone will understand. But 2, we did it basically during Asian American Pacific Islander month. And, you know, right now the world's divided. Mark interviewed me last week and we talked about that. You obviously, you went through it. You literally were born in a different place because of it. You grew up, you know, where, you know, our last name is the Asian name. It's not like, you know, you're white and mom's Asian. So, you know, you're a guy that never recruited kids. You know, I think, and most guys too, like Mark, same thing. We talked about how wrestling's a meritocracy, but, you know, how do you see wrestling, or even the other sports you play, kind of being able to help bring us together and not be so focused on race and those kind of things.
I think any good coach is trying to recruit quality talent. They don't care what color they are. And anyone who is looking for color is really so far from the mark, they're not going to be successful. And I just think that to be prejudiced because of the race is so limiting on what kind of team you can have. But there are people walking around. I see, one of the jobs that I was offered that I thought would be a real challenge was go to East St. Louis, Illinois. And the reason I thought that would be a really cool place is because those guys have to fight every day just to make it. And those are the kind of guys that, Mark, those guys, the guys that are probably make good competitors and good wrestlers. If I could get, 10 or 12 guys every year that had that attitude and I could steer them in the right direction, I think I could make them better people, but also help get them out of that area and get them scholarships and maybe bring some hope to those people. That never came about because of the job I had. I look at things like that. It doesn't make a difference if I go into all black area or all white. Doesn't make any difference. There's going to always be good athletes in there, and you pick out the best quality people. Well, it's good athletes, and that's pretty much how you get decent teams.
Yeah, and I had talked to David last week, and we were talking during his interview. Wrestling's one of the few sports, and this is just my opinion, Ron. I don't know if you feel the same way, is that we don't look at race in wrestling. We look at it's a one-on-one competition. The best man's going to win. I don't really care what color he is, where he's from. I have to compete against him. So I have to do what I'm good at to be successful. He's going to try to do what he's good at to be successful. And the best man's going to win that day. I mean, he may not be the best man every day, obviously, but on that day, one of us is going to be the best guy. And so that's the one thing I loved about wrestling. You don't see that in a lot of other sports,
right?
But in wrestling, you seem to see that more and more. And we don't have the racial tension in the sport of wrestling that some of these other sports have. It's just, we're a family. It doesn't matter. Some of my closest athletes that I'm really close to are not Caucasian, and I'm close to their parents. I'm close to them. At one time when we were having issues at Iowa Central, when I was coaching, I had 2 kids living with me just so they could stay and finish school because they shut the college down, for a short time because we had shootings. And, we'd go over to a park, which was like a block away, and we'd start wrestling, the coach and the student, and I'd have people coming out their doors watching and ready to call the police because they didn't understand what we were doing. We were just wrestling, and I think they kind of figured it out. One would get on top of the other, and then we just kind of push them away, and then we'd keep doing it again. So I think they understood we were fighting, and I was, some old guy wasn't getting his ass kicked, but I mean, that's the way the sport is. We look out after each other. We're the first ones there to help somebody in our sport. And I wish some of the other sports carried over, kind of like what the wrestling community does. Do you agree with that or not see that?
I do agree with that totally. And what's really interesting to me, we've had so many black athletes come through, and they call Jan mom. They'll see her stand, and they just come up and give her a hug. And Jan treats her and saying color doesn't make a difference to her at all. And one of the things that was really happening, like you said, she's probably the best assistant coach I could have had. She can relate to kids and knows how to communicate with them. And she lets them know that she actually cares about how they do. I mean, she'll go and help them with their class if they have any problems, get the right class to get to graduation. Whatever it takes, she's going to do that. I've seen her go out with kids and help them get jobs. So I totally agree. Color is not making any difference to us in wrestling.
I know we're almost up against, time period. When I first found out about the relocation or the prison camps or intern camps, whatever you want to call them, you know, my mom was the one that told me. My dad didn't even tell me. And I think this might be a perfect way to end it. I asked my dad, I said, you know, I think I told you, Mark, that I kind of grew up, you know, got picked on a little bit. I said, how are you not like just out of the world, right? And he said, you know, David, if the war doesn't happen, I don't move to California or Arkansas. If that doesn't happen, I don't go from Arkansas to Kansas City. If I'm not in Kansas City, I don't go to Central Missouri State. If I don't go to Central Missouri State, I don't end up meeting your mom. And if I don't meet your mom, I don't have you and your brother. So what do I have to be upset about? And I always tell people that's like the most gangster answer ever to basically any question I've ever asked anyone. So, you know, I think, you know, the message I got was, yeah, life's not always fair. You got to make the best of it. Certainly we should fight for equality and fight for the right things, but at the end of the day, you know, you have to do everything you can to control your own destiny.
Well put. Well put.
Well,
Ron, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I have the highest respect for you and your wife. You know that. You're like a second family to me. And couldn't have a better guest on the podcast, to be honest with you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
If your son wasn't here, it would have been absolutely perfect. You and me, Ron, just going back and forth. Could probably do it again sometime. We don't have to tell David we're doing it. We'll just get it set up and we'll have a nice conversation.
we'll change the name in the background to Ron Mirikitani, and we'll be good to go. That would be a big upgrade if USA Wrestling would be available. I'd be out of the house. That's for sure. As usual, folks, thank you guys so much for watching, listening, and sharing. This was episode 100. We'll speak again next week.